Is your championship club going forwards or backwards? That's what we're going to be exploring in today's video. So what I've gone ahead and done is I've taken each championship club's finish from the 12/13 season, so 10 years ago now, and I've then worked out the difference between where they've gone ahead and finished in the championship this season, working out how many places they've either fallen or risen across the EFL. Now obviously teams will have fluctuated between that 10-year period, some will have gone up and down several times, but it's still interesting to do nonetheless, figuring out how much your team has risen or fallen from that 10-year mark. So if you do go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like, but without any further ado, let's jump in. And starting out with the biggest faller in the championship based on that 10-year period, we actually have Wigan Athletic, who were playing in the Premier League in the 12/13 season, obviously going on to finish rock bottom of the championship this time, and they were actually relegated in the Premier League in the 12/13 season, the last time we saw them in the top flight. And with everything going on behind the scenes now, it'll be interesting to see how quickly they're back up in the championship. Familiar patterns starting to emerge early on here. The second biggest faller we then have is Reading, who were also in the Premier League in the 12/13 season, and they've just been relegated to League One. Once again, a lot of behind the scenes issues going on at Reading, with several embargoes and transfer restrictions going on behind the scenes there, and how that will actually implicate them going into League One. But a fall of 23 places from the 12/13 season. No real surprises here, as Stoke also feature fairly low down on today's video with an overall fall of 23 places across those last 10 years from the 12/13 season. They were a mid-table Premier League club 10 years ago, and now they're languishing in the bottom half of the championship. Norwich City have gone from a steady Premier League club to not even making it in the top 6 this season, with an overall fall of 22 places from the 12/13 season. Now a lot of people associate Norwich with being a yo-yo club who constantly go up and down between the Championship and Premier League, but around that 2012 period they did have 3 consecutive seasons in the top flight, and obviously there's been a lot of fluctuation since that point, but this season not even reaching the heights of the top 6 in the Championship, which has been a vast underachievement by their standards. Swansea City have had a fall of 21 places across the Premier League and Championship. They were mid-table in the Premier League back in 2012, and obviously since their relegation from the Premier League they've not been able to get back up to that level. Couple of playoff campaigns and then a few seasons after that where they have just gone ahead and missed out. The Baggies have obviously had their time in the top flight, and going back 10 years they were actually a mid-table Premier League club. Had one of their greatest ever finishes in the 12/13 season, going on to finish 8th in the Premier League, the season where they had Romelu Lukaku on loan. He absolutely exploded with 17 Premier League goals, and yeah, to finish 8th in the Premier League was quite the achievement from West Brom at the time. Since that point it's sort of been a regression, a little bit of fluctuation between the Championship and Premier League from that point, and obviously to the point now where they did miss out on the top 6 this season, which was a disappointment. QPR have seen a fall of 20 places overall from the 12/13 season. This year just has not gone to plan at all, and it does seem like a club who started to find their spark again at one point under Mark Warburton, but since that point it's been a real regression this season. Going back to the 12/13 season, so much has changed at QPR from that point. They were relegated from the Championship in last place. It was all a little bit of a mess, with players from all around the world playing who weren't really that interested in the club, it would seem, and yeah, a fall of 20 places sort of sums up QPR at the moment. Similar fall for Cardiff City as well, also experiencing a fall of 20 places overall from the 12/13 season. They actually won the Championship in that season with Malky Mackay as their manager. Managed to fend off the likes of Hull, Watford, Brighton, Crystal Palace to promotion that year, finishing on 87 points, but such similar glories haven't been enjoyed this year. And speaking of Hull, they were promoted alongside Cardiff that year. Not as big of a fall as Cardiff, dropping down 13 places from that 12/13 season, but Hull, I mean, there is a lot more optimism there at the moment, given the ownership, the amount of investment that went into that club in the summer, and how they tried to sort of balance things out in the second half of the season with Rossini in charge. So definitely the thought that in the short term they might be back on track, but looking at the long picture over the last 10 years they have fallen 13 places. 10 seasons ago Sunderland were a Premier League club, so based on that 10 years they've had a fall of 9 places. Obviously there's been a hell of a lot of fluctuation in between all that for Sunderland, with a trip down to League One and then back up to the Championship. In the 12/13 season they just survived relegation by the skin of their teeth in the Premier League. It was the year that Di Canio came in the second half of the season and had a little bit of a bounce with them. But yeah, Sunderland, never a dull moment there, is there? Watford have had a fall of 8 places from the 12-13 season. It was the year they lost in the playoff final, finished 3rd in the Championship, the crazy Deeney moment, but they did lose to Palace that year. Obviously would soon after be promoted to the Premier League, and there's no doubt that Watford, over these last 10 years, certainly in the last few, have been on a downwards trajectory since that relegation from the Premier League, as they've not been able to stick it this time in the top 6 in the Championship. 10 years ago at Blackpool, they were still well entrenched in the Oyston era, and the 12-13 season, I think, is when things really started to go wrong. The season before, they had made it into the playoffs after a Premier League campaign before that. This time it was 15th in the Championship for them. They were going through managers like there was no tomorrow. Holloway left in November. They had Appleton for a bit. Then Paul Ince came in towards the end of the season. And just after that, it very much seemed like the writing was on the wall for Blackpool. But overall, 8 places lower they finished this season than they did that year. Birmingham are by far and away the longest serving Championship club in terms of consecutive years that are still currently in the Championship. 12 seasons Birmingham have spent back to back to back, all in the second tier. They finished 5 places lower this season than they did in that 12/13 season, but for Birmingham, not been that much fluctuation in between these last 10 years, and it sort of felt like they've been one of the clubs to just stand still. So typical that they appear 12th on this list, bang in the middle. The first positive we have on today's video, believe it or not, is actually Huddersfield Town. Despite this being a really disappointing season for the Terriers, they finished 1 place higher this season than they did in their 12/13 campaign. Obviously been plenty of fluctuation in between those 10 years for Huddersfield, trip to the Premier League and then back down again, but yeah, they finished 19th in the 12-13 season, 18th this year. It's a big jump up next though, because we have Bristol City jumping 10 places in the table. The 12-13 season was the last time Bristol City were actually relegated from the Championship to League One, finishing rock bottom of the table. And yeah, the club was a little bit of a mess at the time. There was no doubt about that, finishing with just 41 points that season. Bristol City have re-established themselves as a solid Championship outfit since then. Blackburn Rovers have also taken a jump forward of 10 places in the Championship from 10 years ago. They finished 17th despite having Jordan Rhodes, who scored 27 goals in the 12/13 campaign. Obviously, disappointment in the end that they did miss out on the top 6 given how the rest of this season had gone, but real progress nonetheless from where they were. Next then to Burnley. Now, if I were to do this with any other season for Burnley while they were in the Premier League, obviously it would have been a fall off this year, but 10 years ago to the day, they were actually 11th in the Championship, back when Eddie Howe was their manager. Seems like an absolute lifetime ago, given what Burnley have gone on to achieve then with all those years of solidity in the Premier League, and then Eddie Howe going on to manage a Champions League outfit now in Newcastle. But yeah, Burnley have gone from strength to strength and 10 places higher than where they finished 10 years ago. Been plenty of fluctuation at Middlesbrough over the last 10 years, but an improvement of 12 places from the 12/13 season. Well rooted into mid-table that year. Tony Mowbray was their manager, went on to finish 16th in the Championship that season, and it does feel like Middlesbrough are gearing up for maybe a bigger promotion push next season after how close they went this year on the Carrick. From 10 years ago today, Millwall have had a steady rise of 12 places up the Championship. Obviously in that 10 period there was also a trip to League One, with Millwall spending a few years there, but in the 12-13 season they went on to finish 20th in the Championship and are now well punching above their weight on a regular basis, going for the top 6, albeit just fell short this year. Starting to get into the territory of some big rises now, and next up we actually have my side, Preston North End, with an overall rise up the Football League of 26 places from the 12/13 season, which is not too shabby. That was a real low point for us 10 years ago. We went on to finish 14th in League One. Graham Wesley was the manager at the start of the season. It was a complete overhaul of the squad and everything was just a little bit of a mess. From that point onwards, Simon Grayson came in, got us more competitive in League One, obviously, then solidified us as a Championship outfit, which we've been ever since. I think it's easy to forget with how well the Blades have done in recent years, how long they actually spent as a League One club. 4 consecutive seasons they spent in League One, and their position of second in the Championship this season has been a rise of 27 places based on where they finished 10 years ago today in the 12-13 season. They went on to finish 5th in League One that year. It was playoff heartache for them as well against Yeovil in the semi-finals, who went on to be promoted. And a massive rise in here from Rotherham, and this speaks to how well they've done this season to solidify themselves as a Championship club. Obviously, they got the reputation over recent years to have been a yo-yo between League One and the Championship, but in the 12-13 season, they were actually playing their football in League Two, which shows the massive strides forward they have made in that 10-year period. They were promoted from League Two in the 12-13 season, but now an established Championship club and an overall rise up the EFL of 31 places, which isn't too shabby. Even bigger of a rise though, we have Coventry City, who appear second on this list, becoming a common theme for Coventry to appear quite high up on these table rankings I've been doing recently. But in the 12-13 season, they went on to finish 15th in League One, obviously had an even bigger regression after that to League Two. And now they found themselves in a Championship playoff final up against Luton. It's been a miraculous rise, all things considered. The work that Mark Robbins has done there with the recruitment team and how creative they've had to be with, let's face it, not massive resources for the Championship either. So a rise of 34 places from the 12-13 season. It's the second biggest rise on this list. But by far and away as the biggest riser from the 12-13 season, we have Luton Town with a ridiculous rise of 76 places in English football. Luton weren't even in the Football League 10 years ago. They were playing in the Conference. They finished 7th in the Conference Premier that year, which at the time wasn't enough for a spot in the playoffs, so weren't promoted that season. They had Andre Gray as their top scorer, scoring 17 goals that season. But the rise of 76 places is absolutely ridiculous when you put it into context of the other Championship teams and how much they've risen or fallen in that 10-year period. I think this really puts into context just how miraculous it's actually all been, and the fact that it will be them against Coventry in the playoff final, and one of them will be playing Premier League football next year. It's absolutely crazy. But guys, there we have it. That will now wrap it up for today's video. Thank you very much for tuning in. Bit of a fun one today. If you'd like to see other videos of this type, then do let me know down below. But do stick around and subscribe for some regular Championship content, and I'll see you all in the next one.